Hiranyavarnam Harinim Suvarna Rajatastrajam Chandram Hiranmayim Lakshmim Jatavedo Maavaha. Jatavedo Maavaha Lakshmim. The glorious Sri Shukta begins with submission to Shri. Jatavedaha Narayana, may Sri Mahalakshmi bless me. May she shower abundant blessings. We all believe that when we invoke Sri Mahalakshmi, we acquire wealth. This is our partial understanding. Wealth, no doubt, is a great blessing. But blessing is the greatest wealth. Sri Mahalakshmi blesses us with the ultimate wealth. The wealth of Kainkaryashri. The wealth of bhakti to Narayana. And as we celebrate Navaratri, let us all invoke the Jagannatha for blessing us with abundant Kainkaryashri. Navaratri is a very auspicious occasion. In Sanatana Dharma, we celebrate mainly two Navaratris. Vasanta Navaratri, Sharad Navaratri. Vasanta Navaratri leads to Sri Ramanavami. Sharad Navaratri leads to Vijayadashami. So what we are celebrating now is Sharad Navaratri. While Navaratri is celebrated in various ways across Bharata Desha, the flavor, if I were to use the word, the flavor of Navaratri could be very different depending on the geography, depending on the culture, depending on the tradition. The way Navaratri is celebrated could vary. But the underlying philosophy, the underlying principle for celebrating Navaratri is the same. While we understand Navaratri as 9 Ratris, Nava not only means 9, Nava also means new. Navaratri, new Ratri, new night. What is this new night? We all know night is dark. Therefore, night is dark night. But what is new night? A dark night becomes a new night only if it can pave way for light. That will ensure removal of darkness. Therefore, Navaratri is so very significant for us. Navaratri is not about 9 days or 9 nights. The innumerable lifetimes that we have undergone are all like dark nights, covered with ignorance. This lifetime can potentially be a Navaratri. This lifetime can be a Navaratri that can lead us to everlasting light. How can this life be a Navaratri? Be the new night that can lead us to light? Only when we take this opportunity to acquire the jnana, The jnana of Navavidha Sambandha. Navavidha Sambandha. The relationship between the Jivatma and the Paramatma. The relationship between me and Bhagavan. Pita cha rakshakasseshi bhattagneyo ramapatihi swamyadharo mamatma cha bhokta sadhya manuditaha. The relationship between each of us and Bhagavan is defined in 9 different ways. Navavidha Sambandha. Pita, he is the Pita. Rakshaka, Seshi, Bharta, Jneyaha, Swami, Adhara, Mamatma, Bhokta. When we understand Bhagavan through these 9 relationships, he is the Lokapita. He is the source, the cause, the origin. Rakshaka. He is the only protector. He protected me, he protects me, he will protect me. The Mahavishwasa that he is protecting me all the time. He is Seshi. I am his Sesha. He is the Seshi. I am the Sesha. It's a very unique relationship that we need to understand. I exist only because of him and I exist for him alone. I am his utility. Nothing more, nothing less. Pita cha rakshaka seshi bharta. He is the bharta. I am his bharya. Every time we contemplate on the Gopikas of Vrindavan, we need to be reminded that every Jivatma is bharya, Paramatma is the bharta. Pita cha rakshaka seshi bharta jneyaha. The one to be known. He is the only one to be known. When we know him, we know everything that is to be known in this life. There is nothing else that needs to be known. Therefore, he is the only object of knowledge. Pita cha rakshaka seshi bharta jneyaha ramapatihi swami. Swami. He is my master. I am his slave. It's not fashionable to consider ourselves as slaves, but whether we like it or not, we are all slaves. Slaves of this world, slaves of our own desires, slaves of our vasanas. So its choice is whether we recognize that we are the slaves of only one master or we are slaves of this world. He is the Swami, the only Swami. I am his dasa. Swami Adharaha. Adhara. He is the support, I am the supported. Swamyadharo mamatmacha. The Paramatma indwells. He indwells within. He is the inner controller. He is the Niyanta. He controls, guides all the time. Mamatmacha bhokta sadhya manuditaha. Bhokta. He is the ultimate enjoyer. Anything that we do, the results belong to him. He alone is the bhokta, the ultimate bhokta. This jnana of Navavidha Sambandha blossoms, matures into bhakti. And when this jnana blossoms into bhakti, then the Navaratri paves the way for light, eternal light. The embodiment of this quintessential bhakti once declared, Tat karma yanna bandhaya savidyaya vimuktaye Ayasaya param karma vidya anya shilpa naipunam. Prahlada, the embodiment of quintessential bhakti, makes a declaration in the context of understanding the principle of Tyaga. Prahlada's teaching becomes so very significant. Interestingly, we are celebrating Navaratri, and Krishna's answer to Arjuna's question right at the beginning of 18th chapter, he answers over 9 shlokas. The first shloka is Arjuna's question, which is then followed by 9 shlokas of Krishna, wherein Krishna covers the Purva Paksha and the Uttara Siddhanta of what is Tyaga, what is Sannyasa, before, in the 11th shloka, he concludes on the definition of Tyagi. The great Bhakta Prahlada declares, Tat karmayanna bandhaya savidyaya vimuktaye ayasaya param karma vidya anya shilpa naipunam. The beauty of Nrsimhavatara is not Bhagavan's avatara. Nrsimhavatara is popularly celebrated as Prahlada Charitra. It is Bhakta's glory more than Bhagavan's, because Prahlada teaches, gives us quintessential wisdom on how to live life. Prahlada says, Tat karma yanna bandhaya. Only that karma which does not lead to bondage. Tad yanna karma bandhaya. Tat karma yanna bandhaya. That karma alone, that work alone, that duty alone which is carried out, that does not lead one to bondage. Which means that work which is done based on the principle of Tyaga. Only that, such works lead to liberation. That work which is done, tat karmayanna bandhaya, savidyaya vimuktaye. Only that knowledge, that savidyaya vimuktaye, only that knowledge which leads to liberation. Only that work that does not lead to bondage is real work. That is the duty which does not lead to bondage. Any work which is non-binding is real work. Any knowledge, any learning that leads to liberation is the only knowledge, is the real knowledge. Savidyaya vimuktaye ayasaya param karma. All other works, ayasa, he says, are mere hardship, mere struggle. Ayasaya param karma. All works which are not based on the principle of Tyaga are mere struggle. Most often, we all kind of share this sentiment. Life is a struggle. Whatever we do, we keep struggling. Problem after problem keeps coming. Nothing seems to work out. Ayasa, hardship. Any work that is not based on the principle of Tyaga, Prahlada says, is only will lead to suffering. Ayasaya param karma vidya anya shilpa naipunam, he says. Any vidya, any knowledge, any learning which is not liberating in nature is mere craftsmanship. Shilpa naipunam. Acquiring skills which do not address the ills of life is of no use. What is the point in acquiring all the skills which cannot address the fundamental ills of life and living? The fundamental ill of life, the incompleteness, the sense of lack all the time, afflictions, physical and mental. any vidya, any learning, any knowledge, if it cannot address the ills of life and living, such knowledge is useless tinsel, is of no use, mere craftsmanship. Therefore, Prahlada brings the attention on how we need to lead our life and living. Any work has to be done by a shift in the attitude. Tyaga. Any action that is done as a food for ego can only be hurting. Every action that we do, if we analyze our actions, most of our actions are done as food to our own ego. And any action which becomes food for our ego leads to suffering. And any knowledge that is acquired, no amount of PhDs can help. Now, Arjuna was himself a great learned man. But no amount of learning came to his aid on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Vidya anya shilpa naipunam, mere craftsmanship, he says, which is of no use at all. So therefore, Tyaga, the principle of Tyaga, which has to become the foundation for every work that is carried out. Krishna brings Arjuna's attention back again in the 18th chapter to this principle which he has been repeatedly talking about. So in response to Arjuna's question, therefore, Krishna clarifies. He summarizes, clarifies, and he also presents his position on Tyaga, on Sannyasa. And in that process, he also classifies Tyaga threefold, and he defines Sattvika Tyaga. And in the 12th Shloka, Arjuna's question is completely answered. Krishna presents a clear-cut definition on Tyaga. Nahi deha brita shakyam tyaktum karmanyaseshataha yastu karma palatyagi satyagi tyabhidhiyate. Nahi deha brita shakyam, nahi deha brit. Embodied being, every embodied being, all of us are deha brit. We are all embodied beings. In Atman that possesses a body. Deha brit. Interestingly, Krishna uses the word deha brit, not sharira brit. We have seen this before. There is a subtle difference between deha and sharira. This body can be called sharira. This body can also be called deha. Sharira means that which decays is sharira. Deha, that which grows. Deha brit. Nahi deha brita shakyam. Hey Arjuna, as long as the Atman is embodied in this body, deha brit, it is impossible not to perform actions. Because by design, the body keeps working. The senses keep working. Whether we acknowledge or not, physiological functions keep happening all over. There is not any moment where the body is not working. Therefore, action per se cannot be avoided. The mind is constantly working. Constantly there are thoughts being processed all the time. And as we have seen, even a thought is a form of action. So when we say karma, it is both physical action and mental action. Nahi deha brita shakyam tyaktum karmanyaseshataha. Hey Arjuna, as long as the Atman is embodied, there cannot be avoidance of work. Actions cannot be avoided. Yastu karma palatyagi satyagi tyabidhiyate. Yastu karma phalathyagi. Therefore, if actions cannot be avoided, then how to perform actions? Yastu karma phalathyagi. By renouncing the karma phala. Now, renouncing karma phala, this tyaga is representative here, illustrative. Essentially, it means tyaga, as we have discussed, trividha tyaga. Kartrutva tyaga, mamata tyaga, phala tyaga. All three kinds of tyaga. Tyaga, renunciation of doership, renunciation of mindness, and renunciation of attachment to the fruits of action. Yastu karma palatyagi satyagi tyabidhiyate. He is considered a tyagi. A tyagi is one who does the trividha tyaga, not the one who renounces work. Now we need to here take a pause and address some of our concerns. All of us had this question over the last few sessions. Renunciation, renounce, giving up things is easily said but difficult to do. Is it practical? How do we renounce this world? How do we renounce worldliness? How do we renounce worldly objects? Are we expected to renounce relationships? Are we expected to renounce possessions? Are we expected to walk away from the world? How difficult it is, how easy it is, how practical it is. So when Krishna talks about Tyagi in the 18th chapter, the one who does Trividha Tyaga, he is in a way summing up all the messages on renunciation that he has covered right from the 2nd chapter until the 18th chapter. Right at the beginning of 6th chapter, Krishna talks about karmapala tyaga. Anashrita karmapalam karyam karma karoti yat sa sanyasi cha yogi cha na niragrir na chakrita. He is a sannyasi, he is a yogi who does not take shelter of the fruits of action. Krishna uses this phrase, a very beautiful phrase. Anashrita karma phalam. Anashritaha karma phalam. One who does not take the shelter of the fruits of one's action, he says. He is a sannyasi. He is a tyagi, not the one who renounces performing yajnas, not the one who renounces performing actions. One must engage in all activity. One must perform one's duty, but one must not take shelter of the fruits of the actions. Anashritaha. In our life and living, we are constantly looking for shelters. When we are young, our parents are our shelters. When we grow up, we outgrow that relationship and suddenly we're looking for some other kind of shelters. Our house, our properties, our bank balance, our position. Different kinds of things become shelters. But unfortunately, none of these shelters provide us with that relief we are seeking. Ultimately, what is a shelter? Shelter is that which can give us relief. But no shelter seems to provide us this much wanted relief. That is why we are constantly looking for a very secure shelter without realizing that the real shelter, the shelter of all shelters, is Krishna. Anashritaha karma phalam. Instead of taking shelter of the fruit of the actions, why don't we take the shelter of the tree that gives the fruits? The moment we realize that the shelter that is everlasting is Krishna, then it becomes very easy not to take shelter which is temporary in nature. Now there, Krishna also gives us guidance on how we can renounce the fruit of our actions, karma palatyaga. He starts off the 6th chapter talking about karma palatyaga renouncing the fruit of our actions, and then he leads into a conclusion. Sixth chapter he concludes, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samaya yukta tamo mataha. Of all the yogis, the highest yogi is a bhakti yogi, he says. So therefore, Krishna is very clear. When we talk about renouncing the fruits of our actions, renouncing not for the sake of renouncing. Krishna is not talking about rejection of the world. Renunciation is not rejection of the world. Renunciation is connection with Krishna. That is why he says, Yetu sarvani karmani mayi sanyasya matparaha. Yetu sarvani karmani. Hey Arjuna, you must perform all acts, you must perform your work, you must do your duties. Yetu sarvani karmani sanyasya. How do you perform? By renouncing the fruits of your actions, but mayi sanyasya. Not just renouncing the fruits, offer them to Krishna. Renounce them for the sake of Krishna. Why? Matparaha. Because Krishna is the ultimate goal. When Krishna becomes the ultimate goal, then the result of the action that I perform does not really matter. What matters to me is the goal of all goals. So therefore, renouncing the result becomes a lot more easier when I am focused on the result of all results. Therefore, anashritaha karma palam karyam karma karotiha. Arjuna is taught right in the 6th chapter that it is not about walking away from the world, it is walking towards Krishna. Renunciation is not turning away from the world, it is turning towards Krishna. One can continue to be engaged in this world and still be a renunciate. Here, therefore, Krishna is talking about a tyagi who does trividha tyaga. And how does he do trividha tyaga? Renunciation can have multiple causes. Krishna talked about various causes for renunciation. Renunciation, giving up, can result because of many reasons. Frustration in life and frustration with life. Both can cause renunciation. Aversion also can cause renunciation. Now, what's the difference between frustration and aversion? Frustration is more circumstantial. It's more short term. Aversion is long lasting and it's deep rooted. Both are negative emotions. Now, when we look at the pendulum of emotions, frustration is on one side, and on the opposite side of frustration is infatuation, obsession. Now, we are obsessed, we are infatuated, and if our object of obsession or infatuation, we don't get it, we are frustrated. Now, when frustration becomes deeper and long lasting, it becomes aversion. So, in the pendulum of emotions, the opposite of aversion is attachment. In fact, detachment is not the opposite of attachment. We need to be very clear about this. When Krishna keeps talking about detachment, many times we say attachment, antonym detachment. Attachment means emotional investment. Detachment is outgrowing that emotional investment. Now, both frustration and aversion can be causes for renunciation. That's why Krishna classified tyaga into rajasic and tamasic and sattvic. Now, frustration and aversion can cause renunciation, true renunciation, provided there is another ingredient. If we have to go far away from worldliness, far away, far, F-A-R, frustration, aversion, to go far. Frustration, aversion alone is not enough. We need also R, redirection. Now, when we are frustrated with something, it implies that there is something which is better. But what is better? We need to know what is better. So therefore, in order for frustration and aversion to result in renunciation, there is requirement for redirection. Redirection of our emotion. Redirection of emotion, this is where guidance of Shastras are needed. Now, we all, in one way or the other, we invest money. Now, when we invest money in a company, and if the money and the company keeps losing, and we get to know this, we immediately decide. What do? We disinvest. We withdraw. We are all invested heavily, emotionally invested in worldliness. We are all invested emotionally in worldly objects, in materialism. Now, when we are emotionally invested in worldliness, we get two things. In the short term, we think we get some pleasures, but in the short term, we only get anxiety. We get some pleasures, but loads of anxiety. And in the long term, we get only one thing, guaranteed suffering. The moment we realize an investment is bad, we immediately withdraw. Similarly, the moment we realize our emotional investment is a bad investment, we have to withdraw. We cannot stay invested. But then, withdrawing, divesting our emotion alone is not enough. It needs to be reinvested somewhere. Where do we reinvest? Now, there are two things that are required. Reinvestment and also outgrowing the old investment. If we don't outgrow the old investment, that is also a problem. Imagine carrying the toys that we used all through our childhood throughout. If you don't outgrow, it would be a disaster. Now, outgrowing and reinvestment have to happen together, and that can only happen when we invest our emotions in Krishna. When we invest our emotions, redirect our emotions, invest our emotions in Krishna, we are not only reinvesting, that investment in Krishna also helps us to outgrow our emotional investments in everything else. And therefore, in order for frustration and aversion to result in renunciation, requires a lot of redirection, reorientation and guidance, but in the long run, it is not really sustainable. Renunciation based on frustration and aversion is not sustainable, and also it is not complete. That is the reason why renunciation has to have a solid cause. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. Srimad Bhagavatam beautifully explains this. In response to the rishis of Naimisharanya, Suta Pauranika answers, what is Dharma? All the rishis of Naimisharanya ask Suta Pauranika, who is recounting Shuka's teachings. What is Dharma? Suta says, Savai pumsam paro dharmo atho bhakshir adhokshaje yatho bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratighata yatatma suprasidati. Bhakti to adhokshaja. Bhakti to adhokshaja is our supreme dharma, he says. Why? Because he gives the reason. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. When Bhakti Devi unites with Vasudeva, Vairagya and Jnana are born, he says. Out of the divine union of Bhakti Devi with Vasudeva, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. When Bhakti Devi unites with Vasudeva, two children are born, Jnana and Vairagya. Vairagya, where absence of raga, attachment, we also need to understand absence of attachment also means Vaidvesha also, absence of dvesha as well. Because it is not just absence of attachment, it is also absence of hatred, aversion. Because there is no emotional dependence. One outgrows one's emotional investments in the world. Vairagya, Jnana and Vairagya are born as children. So therefore, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. Only when Bhakti becomes the cause, Tyaga, renunciation can be complete and sustainable. Because, and look at the Nama that Shukha uses. Adhokshaja, he says. Bhakti, when he talks about performing bhakti to Narayana, to Krishna, he uses the Nama Adhokshaja. Adhokshaja, one who never diminishes, who is the source of never diminishing happiness, the source of bliss which is not subject to the law of diminishing returns. So therefore, there is no need to look towards anything else when we have the source of unending bliss. No, renunciation, giving up. Krishna, that's the reason throughout the Gita, he answers our question, how difficult it is to give up things. We always think and we come up with this question, Tyaga, Sanyāsa. Krishna is asking us to give up things. Isn't it very difficult? The question to ask is not what to give up. The question to ask is why to give up and for whom to give up. For whom to give up and why to give up. If we get the answers, what to give up and how to give up becomes very easy. Now, when we love someone, giving up for the sake of the loved one becomes easy. During the early phase of marriage, the couple are ever ready to give up for each other. It's only a matter of time when the couple becomes ready to give up on each other. When there is love, giving up becomes natural things for the sake of the lover, for the beloved. When one is in love with Krishna, offering everything to him comes quite naturally. That is the reason why Jnana and Vairagya have to go hand in hand. When Bhakti Devi unites with Vasudeva, there are two children who are born. Vairagya is one child, Jnana is the other child. The Jnana, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, the Jnana. The knowledge, true knowledge, is not that which denies reality. True knowledge is that which helps us, which helps deepen our experience of reality. We don't need to deny the world. We don't need to walk away from the world. All these attractive objects in this world are real. Our attraction to all these attractive objects are real. We don't need to deny the existence of these. what is important to realize that the sparks are competing with the whole. Aham sarvasya prabhavah vattas sarvam pravartate iti madva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaah. Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavah. Everything that is attractive in this world, everything is just a spark of that abundance of attraction of Krishna. So therefore every source of attraction, the source of everything attractive is Krishna. So the spark should not be competing with the whole. The spark should be pointing to the whole. So anything that is attractive should be a pointer to Krishna. I don't need to deny the world. I need to realize that the beauty of the world is a pointer to the real beauty, the supreme beauty. And with that realization, with that jnana, vairagya comes automatically. Then we don't need to be worried about how difficult it is to renounce. Also, it is important to realize that spiritual advancement should not be measured based on our capacity to renounce. No, many a times we have this doubt and we have this genuine concern. The capacity to renounce should not be the yardstick to measure our spiritual progress. Why do I say that? Because let me give an example. Possibly this is a favorite example for everyone. Some people can renounce extra sleep, some people cannot. Some can sleep for 5 hours, some can sleep for 6 hours, some need 8 hours. I'm talking about sleep, genuine sleep. Now, the question to be asked is not how many hours of sleep I can renounce. The question to ask is how much I can contemplate on Krishna when I'm awake. That is the real question. No, do not come to me and say, Guruji has said anybody's number of hours of sleep is fine, so I'm going to sleep extra from tomorrow. That's not the point. The point is the capacity to renounce can vary due to several factors. It is important, but it should not be the only yardstick. The yardstick for us to measure our own spiritual progress is how much we can stay connected with Krishna. That should be our yardstick. Because samsara is bhavasagara. Whether we like it or not, there are waves. Tsunamis are going to be there. There are going to be different kinds of waves that are going to come and go. Now, for us, it is not about fighting against the waves. It is about staying connected, holding on to an anchor. If we only fight with the waves, it's a never-ending battle where we will never win. But if we recognize our anchor and hold on to that anchor, we can easily cross over and reach the shore of eternal bliss, the abode of Krishna. So therefore, when Krishna says, Yastu karma phalathyagi satyagi tyabidhiyate. Who is the tyagi who does trividha thyaga? Karma phalatyaga, kartrutva thyaga, mamata thyaga. He is a tyagi who renounces the world not for the sake of renouncing the world. He is essentially connected with Krishna all the time, and in that process, renunciation becomes a byproduct. He is the one who has got his direction right. He is not the one who is necessarily moving away from the world. he is the one who is moving closer and closer. He is growing and going closer towards Krishna. That is the Tyaga that Krishna talks about. And this Tyaga, this renunciation is very practical, is easy to implement. And one need not be pressurized and rushed to give up things. One can keep giving up depending on one's own nature. But more than giving up, what is more important is staying connected with Krishna. As long as that connection is strong, then that's why Krishna keeps repeatedly saying this. When Krishna says, Etu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananye neva nogena mam dhyayanta upasate. When you renounce for my sake, hey Arjuna, do not worry. I will take care of everything. Teshamaham samudharta mrityu samsara sagara bhava vinacharat parta maya veshita chetasam. When you renounce for my sake, which means when you do everything for my sake, I will do everything for your sake. I will ensure that you will cross over the ocean of samsara. Krishna takes over the responsibility. In a way, Tyaga is shifting the responsibility to Krishna. So between shlokas 1 and 12, Krishna takes up the topic of clarifying sannyasa and tyaga. He defines tyaga. He concludes that tyaga and sannyasa are one and the same. He defines the various types of tyaga. He gives the lakshana of a tyagi. And in the 12th chapter, he concludes this first segment of the 18th chapter. In the 12th shloka, he concludes the first segment of the 18th chapter by talking about why one must practice tyaga in order to exit from the cycle of samsara. And then in the next segment of the 18th chapter, Krishna will take up the topic of kartrutva tyaga and he will do a detailed analysis. He will do a detailed analysis, which I love to call it as alchemy of action, which is where Krishna is going to break down every component of action and talk to us about how we can perform right actions based on the principle of tyaga. Until then, let's continue to contemplate on the tyagi that Krishna defines in the 11th chapter, in the 11th shloka. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.